Jack, being a sound mind and a broke leg, do hereby leaveth my bar rifle, whatever finds up Lord Hope, it be a white man. It was a good rifle, it killed the bar, what killed me. Anyway, I am dead, yours truly, that's a Jack. That was a Hawken rifle, 50 caliber. All right. I was raised in a different generation where I never could get near a real Hawken rifle, but there was, my generation, they duplicated the Hawken rifle.
Mm-hmm.
It's very characteristic with the silhouette, and the silhouette is the greater part of a rifle. You were trained to look at silhouettes. During World War II, you could look in the sky. Silhouettes, that's how we... So the Hawken rifle has a very distinctive stock on it. And I saw this gun in every opening of every show. I'm at a 5,000 table show. That's approximately 6.5 miles of table front.
Wow.
And you got a half hour and people are putting things out, and that's the treasure hunt period. And I'm about 50, 60 feet, maybe 3 rows of table, and I see a guy putting a Hawken rifle down on a crossbuck pack saddle. And I thought, well, what the hell, man? I said, it's got to be a reproduction, the old negative thing. So I better take a look at it. But I recognized it at 50, 60 feet by its silhouette. So I went over there, and the Hawken rifle that we know today are all what they call post-percussion period. They had flintlocks, and then they changed them to percussion. Flintlock used a rock and a frizzen, created a spark to set off the gunpowder, went into the barrel and fired. They replaced all that with a little percussion cap on top of a nipple with fulminated mercury. The hammer hit it, sent the spark into the chamber the same way. So all the Hawkens in existence today are post-percussion. They're all percussion rifles. They said that the first generation from 1820 to 1830 don't exist. They're all chewed up by wilderness. They're all gone. Not one of them.
Not one.
Not one.
We never got one. Preserved one.
No.
For history.
And in science, it's never, always, or never, never. Now, science is not like absolute. You're always going to find something different. So I go up to this rifle with great hopes, and there's 2 other guys hanging, and I had to wait for them to come off and get off the piece. And I'm looking at it, but when I got close to it, my Hawken, all the post-percussion, it was percussion, but it wasn't a Hawken percussion. It didn't have a name on the barrel, and it didn't have the scroll guard, which so makes the Hawken famous. I'm going, oh, what the hell? But it was a monster. It was black. It was 58 caliber. It was patinaed. I mean, it was gorgeous. So I asked the guy, I said, what would you take for it? And he was grumpy. It was a perfect situation because the rest of his table had nothing to do with frontier guns. And long story short, I bought it in for a fair price. And what you want on a mountain gun, let me step back. When I grew up, they said the 270 or the 30-06 would take any North American game, including Kodiak and moose, but you better be good shooting. But if you took a 30-06 or 270 to Africa, the first Cape Buffalo would make a bracelet out of it for you. Okay, and it's just the way it is. So when they went to the Great Plains in St. Louis, they had 3-ton buffalo and elk and grizzly bear. More importantly, this gun, the only way you can increase the power of a muzzleloader is thickening the barrel to allow it to have more powder. So the heavier, the bigger the barrel, the bigger the powder charge, and but the heavier the gun. So the first Hawkens that were made incorporated a fairly long barrel in a very heavy, fairly long barrel in a heavy barrel, and so that they could sustain 200 grains, 300 grains of powder. That ball would go down range. You could hit a buffalo at maybe 225 and set it right on its haunches. But more importantly, the local inhabitants, the various Indians, knew that they could be struck at 200 yards. Now we have, and our friend Brad probably talks about it, we have people in Colorado Springs that can hunt ISIS with Predator missiles and go home and eat hamburgers in town. So the idea is keep your enemy out there as far as you can. So the Indians, not that they were brave, but they knew the first one in was going to be hit. So they spent all day saying, well, why don't you go? No, I did last week. Well, why don't you go? No one wanted to be first. And so for the mountain man in that first decade of American history in the fur trade from 1822 to, let's say, 1830, this was a phenomenal concept. you had to pack it. And Beckworth rifles weighs 12 pounds 9 ounces. I carried a 10-pound rifle on my left shoulder for a half year going up to Canada. And my body adjusted to it, but I was, but everything became bigger here. I could pull a horse out of a ball. I could do everything with my left hand. Because that wasn't training. Prior to that, I wasn't a muscle guy. It just happened as a result of that effect. So this rifle in the first decade was a phenomenon, and Hawken was the first one to put it on the market. By 1830s, other competitors in St. Louis, Demick and Gemmer, which you'll see tomorrow, all competed for this. And it was mountain gun is iron mounted to keep the reflection down. They're 50 caliber or better in most cases. The Hawken is extremely unique because there's 9 characteristics in the barrel that weren't discovered necessarily by the Hawkens, but they were certainly incorporated into a collection of factors. One of them was they funneled the bore, the front of the gun, the top of the muzzle, so you could get the ball below the entry in with your ramrod down on it, so you're not fighting the ball on top of the muzzle where you can spin off of it. And then you pushed it through a choke area, which was true caliber. So Beckworth's gun, for instance, is 58 at the nose, but the true caliber is .56. And you shove it through a actual choke for about 12 inches, and then it starts widening up again. Why? Because when a gun gets hogged out with shooting, you for a muzzleloader not to explode, you have to seat the ball back on the powder. So you get it in easy, shove it through the choke, and then it would open up a little wider so you could seat the ball without fighting it. And those are the 2 things for quick loading. It had 1 in 48, 1 inch, 1 turn in 48 inches. It had 7 lands and grooves, which meant that the ball, and it was a soft iron ball, so when it fired, it wasn't steel, it would chatter. It let it settle in and start moving. And that allowed, if you were in a hurry and put 60 grains in, that'd be okay. If you put 220 grains, of course the 60 grains wouldn't carry it that far, but it wouldn't affect the accuracy. So you had speed of loading, no matter what charge you had, and you had tremendous downrange impact. And the offset was you had to pack this damn thing. So I spent 3 years pushing against the Hawken cartel, trying to show that this was a first generation Hawken. Once again, I used Descartes. Deductive reasoning and provable observation, and I pushed it into the very possible category. Since I only had 1 sample, nothing to compare it to, I left it at that. And I just said, the title of my little book is The Beckworth Rifle in a Search for an Early Hawken. But nobody, I got scorned by the Museum of the Fur Trade, scorned by Jim Gordon, scorned. So I had to make a living, and I paid $1,200 for the gun, and I sold it for $5,000, which is pretty good. But the guy I sold it to was a good friend of mine, and I said, listen, there's a rawhide repair on the wrist, and the tang, which again supports the long, powerful barrel, the tang comes off the breech and strengthens that wrist part, which could easily break. Anyway, I'll show this to you in person. But I never took the barrel off because I didn't want to destroy the rawhide patch. But I said, listen, there's something freaky about this. And on top of the fact I'd written the Beckworth script 10 years before, so I knew Jim Beckworth coming and going. I said, do me a favor, and at this time all it was I thought an early Hawken rifle, and Beckworth wasn't connected to it in any way. I actually even had it x-rayed, but the x-ray was down at the vet. It was so powerful you could see 3 more dogs on the other side of the gun. So anyway, long story short, I get a call a year later, and he had taken this gun to a space lab that are looking for fractures in metal that are going to outer space. So they start right at the surface and they keep pushing inward. And he says, do you know of a Jeb Beckenthrall? I said, J.B. Beckworth? Yeah, that's what it is. And they had discovered his signature on the bottom of the barrel. Shit. Of course, now he owns it. So, as luck would have it, and going in the other direction, he got in hard times, and I had to buy it back. I bought it back for $12,000. Well, things have a way going around. And then what I had ascertained is Jim Beckworth goes into the Rocky Mountains in 1824. He was good friends with Ashley and Henry, who took him up the river into the Rocky Mountains in 22. And his buddy, of course, was Jake Hawken. So it all fit in. And since he goes into the mountains, that's when he got the rifle. Now this proves my theory that it's an early Hawken because it has the characteristic now we have Beckworth using it. And there's a lot more intrigue with it, but that's where I'm at with this gun so far, so I'll bring it in. But there's no question, it's J.P. Beckworth. I had it, the forensics done on the signature, and the letter reads that it's not only Jim Beckworth, but he's also the author of the signature. And the barrel fits the rifle, so therefore it's Beckworth's gun. And I tried to get it back to the Smithsonian. They said, do you want to sell the rifle? I said, no. I said, I don't. And they said, well, put a price on it. They said, we're spending $500 million on the new African American Museum. Right there, I guess it's right near the Smithsonian. And Jim Beckworth would be the little big man, remember Dustin Hoffman?
Yeah.
But without the alcohol. He was a mountain man, then he became war chief of the Crow Indians, then he came back to St. Louis, went down and fought the Seminoles during the Mexican War, then he comes out here and gets caught in, he opens up actually a hostel right here in Santa Fe, but he gets involved in a 49 re-revolution of the New Mexicans against the U.S. Army, then he goes on to California for the gold rush, all kinds of fascinating things, and it finally comes back, and he doesn't want to, but he's the chief scout for the boys at the Sand Creek Massacre. And he's the guy that did the chief testimony against Shemington and said what a jerk he was and how brutal, and then he goes off and dies in the Cove Reservation. So, Beckworth, I said, okay, well, so how do you price extreme history? Let's say, for instance, Travis in the Alamo, killed at the Alamo. He had a ring, tiger eye and gold, maybe worth, we could buy it for $250, maybe $225 of gold drops. Well, he handed it to the lady, I can't think of her name right now, knowing he wasn't going to make it out. And that ring was appraised at $2.3 million. You take a rifle that was at Custer's last stand, that was about 2 hours, maybe less. There was a Yellow Boy 66 Winchester that they did the forensics. They found all the shells on the battlefield, and the forensics were the firing pins where they hit the back of the shell, and they proved that this little 66 Winchester, that it was maybe a $3,500 gun because it was condition sold for $750,000 because it spent 2 hours at Custer's battlefield. So then you have a rifle, let's say, that was at Alamo, 13 Days of Glory. You know, if you could find one, there may be one. So how do you price extreme history? So I have a rifle that was probably used in the fur trade, and I'm still not established. I'm off the Hawken thing, but when I go back, so I said I'll take $265,000 for this gun. Part of the reason I would like to have Beckworth's rifle where it belonged, I wanted to at least benefit from the deal.
In Museum of the Fur Trade?
No, this would have been back at the Museum of African American Museum.
In D.C.
In D.C. And it would have been, it was, they didn't care about the gun, the caliber, the Hawken, they just wanted to know it was Beckworth's gun. And then it would have gone in there, and it would have been a wonderful example for everybody, because Jim was the kind of the Davy Crockett of the frontier. It would have been a wonderful thing. So I came up with this price. He said, okay, I went back. First thing they do, they're really cold. They don't have time for me, and I have to find my way to a nasty little place. And next morning, I don't feel very good about being there at all. I'm getting this. And he says, well, here's what's going to happen. He says, we're going to have your rifle approved by 2 people. I said, what do you mean? I said, here's a book of research, here's the x-rays. I said, if you want to take a pinch of metal, you want to take a piece of wood, you want to do forensics, you got forensics here, do the signature yourself. If it's his signature, then it's his gun, because it fits in this. No, he says, we have to have an inside firearm expert approve of it in an outside firearm expert. So the inside guy, I do my little dance, about the Hawken, and they get gun, and they show the pictures, and we walk out an hour later, I'm sweating, and he puts his arm around me, he says, Jeff, I can't even spell Hawken. and this is the armor for the Smithsonian.
Wow.
So I go, well, this is really great. So the next morning, I refused to come out of the hotel with my wife. I said, listen, here's what I'm doing. I didn't come here for anybody's opinion on this gun. I said, you want to do the forensics, you do the forensics, but I'm in a very serious position here, because if I have someone discount this gun, then I'm in the same situation I am with Net and so forth. I need you to do your due diligence with your technology, not your opinions. So I didn't bring the gun out. He said, hey, I'm going to ride with you. We'll get through this. Meet this guy. He's an East Coast dealer. He's supposed to be a certified appraiser. Certified appraiser has a protocol that you follow. You get all the history, you do this, you talk where it came from. So the minute I hit the floor with this guy, he was on me. And I brought 2 rifles, and I was trying to show that this gun had indeed been a flintlock prior to percussion, which was necessary to be in the 1820s. And I tried to, he wouldn't let me start my evidence. He wouldn't let me even start talking. And then he started pointing out things. I said, no, sir, you're wrong. I mean, I'd been in the trenches, and he wasn't a Hawken expert. He was just an expert. And his only qualification, I found out later on, is that he'd conned the Smithsonian over the last 3 decades because he went to a bunch of gun shows, and he was a big talking, big son of a gun. And so after about 10 minutes of this, I was lighting up, and I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, let's start over again. This can't be as bad as I think it is. And he wouldn't put out his hand, and it just went south from there. He wouldn't take my book and research and so forth, and he downed the gun. And so I lost, my plane ticket, my travel back. The gun was lost for 15 hours in Washington, D.C. I had to wait up till 3 o'clock in the morning. So, but the point of it is, they never really went to ever really judged the gun on its own. That's a long story short. So I have the gun back, and it recently came out in one article in a beautiful magazine, and I will continue to promote it and build its case. Then I will write a book called The Beckworth Rifle and a Search for Mary Hawken. Let me read the book. So, it's not necessarily warm and fuzzy as you try it.
Is it research for the soul?